How a nation uses its resources for production is an indication of the efficiency of that system. And so what we're going to look at is what's called production possibilities, and it really does a couple of things. It talks about utilizing resources effectively, but it also lets us know about trade-offs. So let's look at this simple diagram using guns and butter. We can produce 80 tons of guns or 80 tons of butter, 80 units, whatever you want to call it, or any combination in between those two. I'm using a linear function here right now. We'll move this and change to a different function in a second, but this is just a way to illustrate the trade-off, and what this shows us is the trade-off would be a constant trade-off. Now, I have it listed as it's a one-for-one trade-off, but it doesn't have to be. This line could be steeper, and it could be a 2-to-1 trade-off or whatever it is. This is simply to explain this idea of a trade-off. So what this means when we talk about the trade-offs is if we have a lot of guns and we want butter, it means we have to give up some of our guns. Or if we have a lot of butter and we want guns, we have to give up a lot of our butter. And so this would be the idea of production possibilities as a trade-off. So let's start here where we have, say, 70 units of guns and 10 units of butter, or we could look at something over here where we have 10 units of guns and 70 units of butter. If we wanted to have more butter and fewer guns, what this says is we'd have to give up 10 guns for 10 units of butter. And this is a constant trade-off. As we see, it moves from this point here to this point here. There's a constant trade-off between guns and butter. And so this linear function just shows that it's constant either way you move. If we have a lot of butter, we want more guns. We have to give up 10 units of butter for 10 units of guns. And this is a constant stream through here. And again, a 10 for 10 transformation of the trade-off between guns and butter. So the linear function of this just shows that the trade-off is constant, and there is no increasing costs or increasing returns to moving to another. But we're going to see that when we look at a concave function. And this is a little different, so let's see that trade-off. We'll start off with a point here. Let's say we have 10 units of guns and 78 units of butter, and we can move up here. We can give up 8 units of butter and pick up 24 units of guns. And so here it's not a one-for-one transformation, but more importantly, we move again now. We give up another 10 units of butter, but we're only picking up 14 units of guns this time. And so again, it's not a constant transformation. It's now decreasing. Once we move beyond the 55 and 55 point, then we'll see the transformation moves in the opposite direction. And what this shows us is that there are costs to specializing in either guns or butter for a nation, and part of that is mostly about labor. There are many people who are very proficient at producing butter, but they're not very proficient at maybe producing guns, and so putting them over in guns means output increases but at a decreasing rate, or vice versa. People who are really proficient at producing guns are moved into the butter realm. They're not all that great. So this is really more about the transformation of labor. Let's take a position here. What this is telling us is that we're not utilizing our resources efficiently. Instead of being somewhere on this blue or turquoise line, which is getting the most for the resources that we're putting into it, we're now getting far less. This may happen because of, say, being in a recession or a country that has poor institutions and people aren't utilizing their talents and their equipment, whatever it is. And so it's really important we want to move to that blue part. Now, where we are is really depends. In World War II, we were closer up here to producing a lot of guns and less butter. We wanted to win a war, so the expenditures on defense increased significantly, about 50% of GDP at the peak of our involvement in World War II. And so that would be an instance of spending time there. But where we are really depends. Let's say we move up here to the point where we now have 60 units of guns and 48 units of butter. Well, if our utility curve, this would be a social welfare function, is one where we want a lot of armaments and less butter, then this is probably the best place, or this is the best place to be. However, we could be in a situation down here where we're more pacifist, or we're more doves, and we want more butter and fewer armaments. So here we're at 70 units of butter and 34 units of guns.